My name is Leah D. Taylor, and I was 29 years old when my sister turned my wedding into a crime scene of champagne, frosting, and family denial. August 3rd was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. 43 guests, soft jazz, white roses, warm lights hanging over the reception hall like little captured stars. My fiancé, Daniel, stood beside me, looking like the calmest promise I had ever made. I had worked for years to reach that moment. Consulting jobs, red-eye flights, hotel rooms that smelled like stale carpet, airport benches used as beds, and underpaid projects I took because I was trying to build something real. For once, I thought I was allowed to celebrate without apologizing for it. Bethany did not agree. She was my younger sister, 22, beautiful in a reckless way, and permanently allergic to anyone else being the center of attention. She arrived late, after the ceremony was already over, wearing a gold, backless dress that looked more suited for a nightclub than her sister's wedding. She did not hug me. She did not congratulate Daniel. She took a glass of champagne, found a corner, and stared through me like I was someone who had cut in front of her in a line she believed belonged to her. I should have known. Bethany's silence was never peace. It was weather gathering. 3 weeks earlier, she had called me crying about her car breaking down again. I had already given her $1,200 in April for repairs, plus covered overdraft fees, a failed Airbnb weekend, and half a dozen, just until Friday, emergencies that somehow never found their way back to me. This time she said she needed a whole new car. Urgent, of course. Everything was urgent when Bethany wanted someone else to pay. I told her no. Not because I could not help, but because I was exhausted from being her plan B while our parents called it sisterly love. She hung up without saying goodbye. I thought she would sulk. I did not think she would carry it into my wedding like a lit match. She waited until the toast. I stood with Daniel's hand warm at the small of my back, glass raised, ready to thank everyone for coming and talk about building a life with someone who made peace feel possible. Bethany stood too. For one strange second, I thought maybe she was going to surprise me with something kind. Maybe some part of her remembered we used to share cereal on Saturday mornings and whisper secrets under blankets during storms. Then she threw the champagne. The liquid arced through the air, glittering under the lights before it exploded against the dessert table. The glass shattered near a framed photo of Daniel and me smiling on a cliffside in Maui. Before anyone could move, Bethany grabbed the wedding cake and shoved it hard. It did not simply tip, it collapsed. 3 white tears, sugar flowers, careful piping, all of it folding into itself before smearing across the floor like something wounded. She looked me dead in the eye and screamed, "This is what you get for acting like you're better." The room went so silent I heard someone's phone vibrating against a table. Daniel stiffened beside me. His parents stared at me with disbelief and pity, which somehow hurt worse than shock. The DJ cut the music. My maid of honor covered her mouth, and my mother, instead of coming to me, ran to Bethany. "She just needs to let it out," Mom said. Wrapping her arms around my sister like Bethany was the one bleeding. That was the moment something inside me went cold. Not loud, not dramatic, just cold enough to preserve every detail. Bethany did not apologize. She did not cry. She walked out with frosting on her wrist and triumph in her posture, like she had finally corrected some cosmic imbalance. I said nothing, because I refused to let her turn my wedding into her courtroom. I touched Daniel's arm, whispered that I was okay, and nodded to the coordinator. The rest of the night limped forward. Some guests danced because they were kind. Others pretended not to look at the ruined cake. But everyone knew the memory had already been stamped. At home that night, Daniel helped me out of my dress in silence. He asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine. I was not fine. I was focused. While he hung up his suit jacket, I opened my laptop. First, I logged into the university portal and revoked the tuition deposit I had made for Bethany the month before. $9,400 returned to me. Then I opened the rental portal for the apartment lease I had co-signed, locked the account, and marked it for review. No automatic rent payment, no approval, lease frozen. At 8:40 the next morning, Bethany called. I did not answer. Her first text said, "What the hell?" The second said, "Why is the portal locked?" The third said, "Did you do this?" I made coffee, muted my phone, and watched the morning light hit my wedding ring. The wedding was over, but Bethany's consequences had just begun. By the time Bethany sent her sixth text, she had dropped the fake confusion. The last one simply said, "Fix this." I set the phone face down on the counter and poured cream into my coffee like it was any other morning. Daniel stood near the window, still wearing the gray t-shirt he had slept in, watching me with that careful quiet he used when he knew I was close to cracking but refused to push. I had not told him every detail yet. Not because I was hiding it. He would have supported me. I just wanted one calm minute where Bethany's crisis did not own the air in our home. Around noon, my mother called. I let it ring. Her voicemail came through a minute later, soft and disappointed, which was always more dangerous than anger. "Your sister is very upset. She feels abandoned. Call me." I actually laughed. Bethany had not felt abandoned when I co-signed her lease. She had not felt abandoned when I paid the tuition deposit, covered overdraft fees, paid for car repairs, rescued her from a failed Airbnb weekend, and sent her money just until Friday that never came back. No one ever called to ask if I felt used. But now that the account was frozen, suddenly everyone had feelings. Bethany went silent for 2 days. Then she showed up outside our apartment. Daniel saw her first through the peephole. "She's here," he said flatly. I stayed seated on the couch, my hands folded in my lap. She knocked for almost 10 minutes, loud and rhythmic, like she could pound the door hard enough to turn consequences back into convenience. Finally, Daniel opened it only a few inches. Bethany did not even greet him. "Where's Leah?" she demanded. "I have 5 days to pay rent. The portal is locked. My school account is messed up." She had no right to do this. Daniel's expression did not change. "She had every right," Bethany scoffed. "This is between sisters." "No," he said. "You made it public when you destroyed our wedding cake in front of 43 people. Her face twisted. "Oh, please, it was cake." "She's acting like I killed someone." I stood then, but I did not go to the door. I wanted to hear how she spoke when she thought I was not listening. Bethany continued, voice rising. "She has a moral obligation to follow through. She promised tuition. She signed the lease. She can't just yank everything away because she's mad." Daniel leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "She is not mad. She is done." That shut her up for half a second. Then she started shouting about legal rights, about how I could not ruin her life without warning. But I had checked everything. I was primary on the rental account. She was the resident. I had funded the tuition deposit voluntarily. No contract required me to keep financing someone who humiliated me at my own wedding. Bethany left screaming that I would regret this. Daniel closed the door softly, then turned the lock like punctuation. 3 days later, she emailed me with the subject line, "Are you seriously doing this?" Inside, she listed her expenses like an invoice for my obedience. Rent, tuition, food, transportation, late fees. Then came the guilt. She said she had acted out at the wedding because she was overwhelmed. She said I was the only person in the family with real money, and that I had let success go to my head. I forwarded it to Daniel with one line, "Your turn to read the circus." That evening, Bethany escalated. She waited until Daniel came home from work and tried to slip in behind him through the door. He caught her wrist before she crossed the threshold. "No," he said, low and calm. She tried to twist past him, and this time his patience vanished. He pushed her back into the hallway with clean, controlled force and said, "Try that again and I call the police." Bethany shrieked like he had thrown her down a staircase. Daniel stepped inside, locked the door, and washed his hands like he had touched something sticky. 10 minutes later, my father called. He began with a sigh. Leah, we need to talk about your sister. What part? I asked. The champagne, the cake, the trespassing, or the money? He ignored that. She is spiraling. What she did at the wedding was emotional. You cannot punish her for one bad moment. It was not a moment, I said. It was a pattern. He started talking about family unity. I hung up. By then, I understood what none of them wanted to admit. Bethany was not spiraling. She was finally falling, and they wanted me underneath her again. After Daniel pushed Bethany out of our hallway, we did not talk about it right away. We sat on the couch, the apartment quiet, except for the low hum of the air conditioner, and I poured him a glass of wine with hands steadier than I expected. It should have felt shocking, seeing my husband physically block my sister from forcing her way into our home. Instead, it felt like a line had finally been drawn in permanent ink. Daniel did not need to give a speech. He had already shown me where he stood. Bethany did not come back the next day, but she did not disappear either. She started texting Daniel instead of me. At first, the messages sounded like apologies, but every paragraph bent itself back toward the same demand. She was hurt. She was overwhelmed. She had made a mistake. But I still owed her. Daniel ignored the first three, then blocked her after the fourth. That was when Bethany changed tactics. She told our parents Daniel had attacked her, that she had only come over to reconcile, and that we treated her like a stray dog. That was how the family group chat began. My father added me, Daniel, my mother, and Bethany into one chaotic little courtroom and wrote, "Let's have an honest conversation without yelling or blocking. We are still a family." Bethany replied first. She said she had felt invisible at my wedding. She said watching me be celebrated made her feel like everyone had forgotten her. She claimed I had been rubbing my success in her face for years. My mother immediately followed with, "She is still your baby sister. She is finding herself, Leah. You need to move forward and forgive." Daniel left the group chat without typing a word. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling that old pressure rise in my chest, the pressure to explain, soften, rescue, and be reasonable. Then I typed exactly 3 sentences. She is not a baby. She is 22, and she needs to learn the cost of disrespect. No one replied. No typing bubbles. No angry paragraphs. Just silence, which somehow felt louder than shouting. 2 days later, Cousin Kara called to tell me Bethany had moved out of the apartment. She could not pay rent, could not find a subletter, and the rental company contacted me for final paperwork. I handled it calmly, signed what protected my credit, and closed the account. I thought maybe that would be the end of the Lease drama. Then came the real insult. A week later, I found out Bethany had enrolled back in school anyway. Not under my name, under my parents'. They paid the tuition themselves. After all the lectures about how I had more money, after all the guilt about how Bethany had no one else, Harold and Vivian had pulled out a card and paid quietly, so they had the money. They just did not want to use it while they could pressure me first. That night, Daniel and I sat on the balcony with cheap wine and leftover pasta. I told him I felt like a decade-long weight had finally been cut loose. He smiled and said, "Good, now we can live." For the first time, I believed him. Then my mother called like nothing had happened. No apology, no, "How are you?" Just, "You'll be at your father's birthday next Saturday, right?" I said I was not sure. Her voice tightened. "Bethany will be there. I want you two to talk like adults, and I want you to stop being so cold." I hung up before I said something I could not take back. The night before the party, Bethany sent me a Venmo request for $1,800. The note read, "For the cake and broken frame, LOL. Let's call it even." I handed the phone to Daniel and walked onto the balcony. When I came back, he had answered. 15 minutes later, Bethany blocked us both. We did not go to my father's birthday, but Bethany did. Kara sent a photo. Bethany was wearing a white jumpsuit that looked suspiciously bridal, standing beside some real estate guy she had met 2 weeks earlier. According to Kara, she kept telling people, "Big things are coming." That Monday, we learned what she meant. Bethany launched a podcast called Bloodline Bruises, Growing Up with the Golden Child. In the trailer, she talked about toxic families, invisible daughters, and being abandoned by the people who should have protected her. The comments called her brave. The sponsor was a therapy app I had introduced her to a year earlier. Then Bethany emailed me. Subject line, "Let's talk." The message was calm, polished, almost professional. "No drama. I have things I want to tell you. I think you'll be proud of me." Daniel read it twice. "She's not trying to fix anything," he said. "She's setting a trap," I replied with one line. "Daniel will be there too." She never wrote back. 3 nights later, my parents appeared at our door without warning. My mother said Bethany was in a transformative period. My father said the podcast was her way of healing. I asked one question. "Did either of you tell her what she did at my wedding was wrong?" Neither of them answered. That silence told me everything. My parents stood in our living room waiting for me to soften. My mother kept saying Bethany was processing. My father kept saying she wanted a relationship, but did not know how to ask for it. Daniel stayed in the kitchen with his arms crossed, silent but solid, the kind of presence that reminded me I was no longer alone in rooms where my family tried to rewrite reality. I asked them again, slowly this time. "Did either of you tell Bethany that destroying my wedding cake, throwing champagne, and screaming at me in front of Daniel's family was wrong?" My mother looked down at her purse. My father rubbed his forehead. Neither answered. That was all the answer I needed. I told them I was done. Done with the money, the guilt, the emergency transfers, the surprise visits, the family meetings that were never about accountability, only damage control. If they wanted to keep funding Bethany's life, they could. If they wanted to pretend her podcast was healing instead of performance, they could. But it would not come from my account, my marriage, or my peace anymore. My mother whispered, "You sound so cold." I almost laughed. "No," I said. "I sound like someone who finally stopped paying to be disrespected." They left after that, not because they understood, but because Daniel opened the door and waited. Bethany did not contact me directly after that, but her podcast kept going. Episode 2 was about narcissistic siblings. Episode 3 was called When They Make You Look Crazy. Daniel and I laughed at that one harder than we should have. Cousin Kara listened so I did not have to, and said Bethany was stretching the truth so far it had started snapping back in her face. At first, people in the comments called her brave. Then the stories got messier. Details changed. The sponsor stopped reposting her. The sympathy slowed. Nothing collapses faster than a victim story built on someone else's money. A few days later, I checked our apartment lease. 8 months left. Then I checked our savings. Ran the numbers twice. And told Daniel we should go somewhere far away. Somewhere warm. Somewhere that did not smell like family tension and frosting on hardwood floors. He looked up from his laptop and smiled like he had been waiting for me to say it. The next morning, we booked 2 round-trip flights to the Maldives. 6 weeks out. No parents, no Bethany, no rescue missions. Just water, silence, and the kind of peace that finally felt earned. The last message I got from Bethany came 2 days before our flight. Just a fire emoji. No words, no explanation, no apology. A tiny vague warning. Or maybe just one last attempt to remind me she was still watching. I showed Daniel while we were buying luggage tags. He glanced at it, scanned his boarding pass, and said, "Perfect. Let it burn." So I blocked the number. After that, silence settled over everything. My father did not call. My mother sent one generic, "Hope you're well" text that I ignored. No lectures, no group chats, no Venmo requests labeled like jokes. I think they finally realized I was not going to be the one to fix what they had spent years breaking. We flew out on a Thursday morning. I watched Daniel sleep against the airplane window while miles of open water stretched beneath us, endless and blue. For the first time in years, my mind did not feel like a room full of alarms. Our bungalow sat over the ocean, and there was a little wooden sign inside that read, "No clocks. Let time be yours again." I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at those words while the waves moved under the floorboards. We did not talk about Bethany until day 4. We were eating breakfast on the deck when Daniel asked, "Do you think they'll ever admit it?" I knew who he meant. "No," I said, "but I think they know." Not in a brave, honest way, more like the silence that creeps into a house after the scapegoat stops answering the phone. They knew I had been the one cleaning up Bethany's messes. They knew they let it happen because saying no to her was harder than using me. Eventually, Kara told me Bethany stayed with my parents and enrolled part-time again, using their money. Apparently, they dipped into a rainy day fund they had claimed did not exist. I almost laughed. They had the money all along. They just preferred mine. Daniel and I came home to a different life. We moved into a quieter place, changed passwords, closed shared accounts, and left my cosigner days behind. Some nights we sit on our porch drinking wine, talking about books, trips, and the business Daniel wants to build. Real things. Peaceful things. I do not talk about the wedding much anymore. Bethany turned one day into a spectacle, but she did not get to turn it into my life. Sometimes fire does not need to be fought. Sometimes you let it burn itself out, step away from the smoke, and finally realize you are still warm.